Says we're live on Facebook.
Unbelievable.
Awesome. Well, hello. Hello, folks. Hopefully we are live on Facebook. It's telling us where Andy and I have cracked the code in the world of technology. Hopefully the internet stands up for today's conversation. But welcome along. We thought we would come and hang out and drink a little bit of wine, and maybe, depends on your version of the world, share a little bit of our wisdom when it comes to the world at large at the moment. You know, the world of Corona, the world of business, finances, and all sorts of things. So Andy and I thought it'd be great to sort of sit down and share a little bit of that. And hopefully for you folks out there who are dialing in today on the Facebook Live, maybe, you know, glean a little bit of support, information, knowledge that can help you maybe in your circumstance now or into the future. So welcome along, Andy Fenton from Fenton Financial, fantastic friend, professional, colleague, and extraordinaire. Mate, great to do this. This is our first crack at it, so I'm excited.
Likewise, it's look, just to let everyone know the initiative, the reason why we thought about putting this together is that obviously Jason and I are in contact with a lot of people from week to week, those from an investor level through to business owners. And one of the things that we're seeing a huge amount of is, you know, there's disinformation out there. There's a lot of people who are throwing opinions around that we're seeing constantly, and people are jumping in different directions. So we wanted to give you where we know them, the facts, where we can, the positions that we're seeing and what people are doing out there, and hopefully just cut through some of the noise and distraction, because you know, we're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, and being able to share the experience of what a number of our clients and people we're associated with are doing, in a hope that, you know, you can start to get ahead of it, whether you're, you know, a PAYG employee, whether you're a business owner, whatever's happening in your world. We're certainly in unprecedented times, and there's been a lot of legislation dropping, and well, actually the legislation hasn't dropped yet, really. There's been a lot of guidelines set out, but not a lot of details behind it. So we're just going to share with you what we've been experiencing. Just the FP disclaimer, we're not going to give any advice in here. So we've already had a few people drop in, where's gold going to go to? We want to avoid that and stick to more of the practical side of the equation, so that we can share things that are, you know, not advice related. So wherever you think that we're giving advice, go and chat with your relative professional, relative advisor before sort of making any further decisions on it. So, mate, where do you want to start? I reckon at the moment, where the most amount of stuff I'm seeing moving around is relating to banking and banking loans and tenancy at the moment. And there's a huge amount of movement.
Huge amount of movement out there, for sure. I mean, you know, in my world, in the property investor world, so on the property side of things, you know, a lot of people are wanting to know about their tenancies, being a landlord, you know, what are their, you know, what can they expect? And then on the other side, if they do either lose their own jobs or their tenants are unable to pay the rent, you know, where's this game of hot potato going to end up? You know, who's going to foot the bill? Who's going to take the responsibility on this one? But at this point in time, it's 99% clear at this point, as in the direction the government is going with the assistance of the banks, that right now there's going to be a window that everybody's agreeing to, which is a 6 months thing. All right. So this version of time, which is 6 months now out there in the banking world and also tenancy world. So a tenant, your tenant, or if you're a tenant in any way, shape or form, commercial, residential, retail, industrial, there's this moratorium of, okay, everybody, let's work out the next 6 months. We need to sort of all play fair on this one. There is some rules that the government and the banks are encouraging us to follow. So number one, what we do know right now, that legislation is fast and furiously being passed, that you cannot evict somebody out of a tenancy right now, whether it's commercial, industrial, retail, or residential. You can't kick them out right now. for 6 months. There's a ban, there's a moratorium on booting someone out of your property. Now that brings up all sorts of questions, and it leads into the insurers as well. You know, if I'm losing rent, do I get insured? But let's not go down that track at the moment. But what we do know, fact number one, fact number one is 6 months. You can't be kicked out, and nor can you kick someone out. Like, that's what the government has said. Now, whether people play by those rules or not, you know, is probably maybe a discussion for later on. But right now, a tenant in your property cannot be removed from that property for not paying the rent. Okay, whether it's genuine or not right now, guys, whether they've still got a full-time job and they couldn't be bothered paying the rent, or they have serious hardship and they can't pay the rent. Right now, there's no distinction as of today. Okay, so what the government is sort of saying is get in with your property manager and your tenant and work it out, you lot. Okay. For us, what we've done with our clients, Andy, and a few of them are probably dialed in today, is that we have given them a bit of a pack, a bit of a structure to use with their property managers. And a lot of good property managers have done this already. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, answer all these questions, provide all this information, please. Collecting all that info is really important for your insurance, which is the next part. So, you know, really, you can't kick someone out. Our advice right now is to gather as much information as possible and work with your property manager and your insurance company to follow the rules that make sure you're still covered from a loss of rent point of view. So there's a little bit of confusion in here, and I want to try and be as clear as possible. Doesn't matter in the moratorium about not kicking people out. If the tenant damages the property or does something willful to destroy the property, that is still 100% covered by the insurer. Okay, that is not being affected in the corona world. But people's loss of rent, there's a big grey zone in around losing rent and what that means. The general gist of the conversation right now with the insurers, as of today, with the insurers that we talk to, is that if you and the tenant agree for a rent reduction, so that's a mutual agreement, then that difference is not loss of rent. That's a mutual agreement and not covered under your insurance policy. So there's a bit of a fine line to work there. So the two things you need to do on that is work with your property manager and understand the rules of your insurer right now. So they are a little bit different, but you can't kick someone out for 6 months. So you've got to work it out, right?
And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, with what's happening? And they're in there, and no doubt right now and over the course of the weekend, they're going to be talking about how to legislate all of this.
Yes.
But it really does make sense, because if you think about the first step of what they've done is they've come out and they've worked with the banks to be able to give a relief period, right? And what relief means is it doesn't mean that you don't have to pay your mortgage and your interest over the next 6 months. What it means is you might carry forward the unpaid interest for 6 months, but effectively for the next 6 months, you can get relief from paying any of those mortgage bills. So if you're a landlord and you've got a rent, or you've got a tenant potentially who is ringing you up and saying, look, we're really struggling, can we negotiate something? Follow Jason's guidance, but then also I'd be straight onto the phone to the bank and saying, look, our tenant isn't paying. What can we negotiate as far as the loan is concerned, so that there's not out of pocket on either side? So it's quite smart. Logistically, how it's all going to play out with the legislation is going to be really, really interesting, because let's face it, the government usually spend 12 months of the year arguing to then put out legislation that we then argue about for the next 3 or 4 years, right? And they're doing this in less than a month. Like, this is unprecedented, but the intent is quite clear. The banks are going to give you the potential to be able to defer all of your payments, give you relief from those payments for the next 6 months, but the interest most likely, and it's a negotiation, but the interest most likely will defer to that 6 month period. So there's a couple of things that I want to chat to around that, which I'm seeing. Is it doesn't mean go out and defer right away. Now, this is key. go and negotiate with the bank so that you potentially can, or negotiate with them so at some point in time, should you need to, you can defer. But be very, very cautious about going out right now if you've got capacity and deferring, because there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to offer the deferral for another 6 months post that. So what do I mean by this is negotiate now that if you need to, that the bank will give it to you, right? But if you can afford to do it for the next few months, you've got to up your own cash flow. But if you estimate that you're going to be doing okay for the next month or 2 months, right, but then you're going to come on cash flow hard times, perhaps think strategically about when to take that deferral, right? Yeah. Because you might need to take that deferral in 2 months' time for 6 months, yeah. Right? So don't just rush out and do it because everyone's doing it. Have the conversation with the bank. Keep the lines of communication open with the bank. So I'd, say I'll give you a call in 2 weeks just to make sure that that still stands. Or they might say, you know what, for the next month, anytime you can actually defer, right? So you want to have those conversations. The second one around this is you might want to take your money out of the account where they're drawing. Once you defer, you might want to take the money out of the account that they're debiting your loans from. Mostly because I don't think the bank's intention is to take your money, but let's think about the logistics of this. The banking sector as well is going to have to implement technology to stop all of these processes. And what we've already seen with a number of clients is that, yes, they've deferred their loans, but the money has come out anyway. So juggle those two things. Think about when to defer, and negotiate with the banks now. And then when you do defer, potentially rip the money out of that account, just so that there's no processing errors on the bank side of the equation, and that you've got those funds there that can ultimately be there to support you.
Yeah. A couple of things to add there, Andy. Number one, redraw facilities. So redraw instead of offsets. Redraw, certainly the bank can apply automatically. So again, not intentionally, but automatically, they can apply redraw to payments that are missed. So if some people have got redraw, then, the suggestion is to move that out as well. And also, you can, instead of doing a full deferral or capitalizing the interest for 6 months for later, you can do two things. You can, instead of capitalizing, you can ask to extend the loan another 6 months. So it's just 6 months more of payments instead of making the payment extra. Or you could reduce your payments from principal and interest to interest only, and or get a reduction in the interest rate. So there's a few ways to go about it. So again, I agree with you, be smart, do your numbers, negotiate and talk with options, because they are there. Because right now what the government has done is they've said, listen, the government's going to underwrite the banks. We're going to give the banks a heap of dough. The banks are going to give you some relief, and then you need to give some relief to someone else, because that's the easiest system to do this with. At the end of the day, if you are in trouble, if you do get stuck, a genuine relief system is there, which I think quite smart how they've done it. Use the existing infrastructure, to distribute that relief, fairly quickly. Like you said, there's a huge overwhelm in the beginning of the infrastructure that they've got, sifting through it. So, be patient and be smart about how that's going to go down.
Yeah, and I think that also goes down to the government want us to push through this. And this is an opinion piece right about now, but the government want us to be able to have cash to redistribute into the economy once this virus pushes through, right? Otherwise, that's the key thing. If we get out the other side, nobody's got money in their pockets, we end up in, Great Depression type of times. And that's what the government's trying to, prevent. So the idea of potentially taking that money out of redraw and out of offset accounts to secure your, what we call future fund for personal. So for personal spending, it's your future fund. And in business, we call it a war chest. And so whether you're in business or whether it's just a personal equation, having that money in an account where you can use it, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So strategically taking that out before you have those negotiations, because we've already seen a couple of people who have gone in to have negotiations whereby the banks have basically done the negotiation, done the right thing, but the redraw, bang, gone. And they were relying on that as being a bit of a buffer. And now they're having to have conversations with the banks, which are complicated conversations in a time where they're just trying to get people in, out, and ostensibly, I believe, trying to do the right thing by people. So we've just got to be smart and pragmatic about how we're doing it. And that comes down to, a real budgeting thing. So I guess the next thing is, whether you're a business owner or whether you're an employee, what you need to be doing is you really need to be calculating your own profit and loss and your cash flow expenditure right down to the last penny. And that's, personal as well. Again, plan for disaster scenarios so that, if it's 3 months and we're back to normal and you've planned for 6 months, then, the future looks a lot brighter for you. But if it did go the full 6 months, then at least you're thriving, well, not maybe thriving, but you're surviving. You just want to really manage that cash flow buffer, manage your cash flow as best as you possibly can. And I know it's really easy to say this right now because I know that there's people who are struggling, but do the best that you can to be able to get as nimble as you possibly can and have as much cash reserve as you possibly can throughout this period of time, but be strategic with the banks.
Yeah, mate. Absolutely, mate. Like, the control of cash is king at this point in time. They say cash is king, but controlling the cash is the real move. Like, where is that cash? How fast and how safe is that cash? Can you get at it and can you use it? The flexibility in that sort of space when it comes to those sorts of things. It was I was chatting with my business partner Sam Saggers the other day, and we have a conversation often with a lot of people about most people we meet and talk to in the regular world, might call the regular world, not in my little bubble and maybe not in your little bubble. But most people are about 3 to 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks away from financial disaster. Right now, I think this is kind of like a real sort of, look in the mirror really hard and fast for the whole of Australia to see how close they are or were or could have been to a financial absolute train wreck in their lives. And for me, and I don't say this in a bad way, I think it's an absolute gift for many Australians to realise where they are, and there's not a disaster coming because the government and the banks are going to take care of that. But don't underestimate what a gift this is to recognise what it would have been if they didn't, and maybe just get your shit together for the next 10 or 20 years of your life if you haven't already. You know what I mean? It's really interesting, those conversations,
I think we take it for granted a lot of the time, but the reality, and I don't think a lot of Australians actually know this because it gets spurted around by ScoMo, and I think that people don't always believe the politicians. And I guess pretty good reason not to. But we literally do as a country. We've got one of the best balance sheets in the world, and we've got 5 of only a few other AAA rated banks. AAA meaning the highest possible credit rating that you can apply. So from an infrastructure perspective, and my partner's from Poland, and what I can tell you is the relief packages that are sitting out in Europe and Italy and around the world are nowhere near what's actually happening out here. And I agree, it is a gift, and we are very, very lucky to be in a country that actually has the resources to be able to do this. And so I think that, making sure that we pay attention to it. And also, I guess, based on that, counsel the people around you, because this isn't really a time to take the piss. And if we want to take a look at the one side of the equation, because there's going to be opportunists that are around here that are going to use the stimulus for purposes that it's not intended for. And it was interesting, ScoMo said the other day, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but my ears pricked up halfway through the press conference, and I'm like, ooh, Jesus, that had a fair bit of heat to it. And it was in regards to people who may treat the stimulus or try and abuse the stimulus, or try and manufacture scenarios to be able to access it where they're really not entitled to. And I reckon that while they're able to pass legislation pretty quickly, and again, opinion, I reckon that they're going to put some pretty bloody harsh measures in place for people who try and take the piss through times like now. So, it's good to be creative, and it's good to be able to build up your war chest, but there is an ethical line that we do need to acknowledge that exists there. So maybe manufacturing scenarios where otherwise we don't need it, just be really cautious with that, because you might find yourself on the wrong end of a really bad wooden spoon. on the opposite side of it.
Totally, mate. Yeah, and it's interesting. I saw one of the articles from the Australian Banking Association as well. You know, talking with banks and for me, I think one of the biggest risks out of all of this from a real estate point of view is the commercial end of town. I personally believe residential will get through this pretty well unscathed, to be honest. There might be a little bit of quietness and flatness in the next 6 or 12 months or 18 months, but residential is not going to be affected. Mum and dads aren't losing their homes. There's no way mum and dad's going to lose their home. That's not going to happen in this time. Like, the bank, if there's a genuine reason that someone can't make a payment, you don't have to. It's simple. Even if you didn't even call the bank, right now, there is legislation that was passed yesterday. Even if you didn't call the bank and your payment bounced, it won't show up in your credit rating. They're having a there's a 6 months credit blanket on reporting bounce payments to the credit agencies now. So, like you said, don't take the piss, but for the genuine person right now, if there's a genuine issue in the marketplace, they're not going to lose their home based on not having a job or not paying the mortgage. They might lose it for something else, but, unlike the GFC or other things that we've been through, Andy, where, there was genuine people losing their home because they couldn't make the payments in the banks before closing. I believe on the flip side of this, one of the biggest risks, that could be unforeseen is that the world of commercial tenancies, I think commercial rents are going to be affected, and I think commercial values are going to be affected. And then in commercial lending world, when your valuations and loan to value ratios are out, the banks are well within their rights to call those commercial loans in. And that's one of my big concerns for a few people out there. Just make sure they check in on their commercial lending and stuff like that, and just get themselves organised and prepared potentially for a little bit more heat after that in the commercial world rather than the residential world. I don't believe the residential world is anything to worry about, in my opinion. Again, opinion, not advice. But certainly I think the commercial world's going to have a little bit more heat than the resi world on that sort of space.
I think it's a great point, and probably one of the things that I'll say, again, not going to the advice side of the equation, but a lot of small to medium business owners have their own factories and things within their self-managed super funds. So negotiating those relief is going to be, or negotiating that relief between you as the business owner and you as a trustee of the super fund. Let's just get ahead of that, right? Let's open up the conversations with your accountants, because that's really interesting and it hasn't been spoken about as yet, and it's going to be something that you're going to need to navigate. I believe, and this is a belief, not a fact, I believe that they're going to create some relief within these areas as well. I think that they'd almost have to, right, because the penalties are so significant. But just get on the front foot with it if you've got those commercial properties sitting in your self-managed super funds.
Absolutely.
Because, you don't and just on the commercial, just on the other facilities, while we're talking, I actually saw something come past my desk recently with regards to relief on equipment leasing and financing. Just wherever you're negotiating, whether it would be with a bank, whether it be with a semi-bank, whether it be a mortgage, whether it be equipment leasing and finance for car loans or other equipment, be really, really careful about what's in the fine print and ask a lot of questions. Don't leave there until you know exactly what the scenario was, because something came across my desk which was relief for 6 months and then 7 payments in the 7th month, and that's going to be crippling at that point in time. So you don't really want to be entering into that arrangement, and potentially you need to be saying, hang on, let's engage in further conversation. So even though there is this kind of feeling like, oh wow, we can just go and ask and we'll be given everything, there's still the fine print, and just ask practical questions. So what does it look like in month 7? That's a great question to ask. What does it look like in month 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? Are we pretending like 6 months never existed, the interest is capitalized, and then it goes back to normal, but with 6 months more on the back end? Just ask those questions so that you can be fully informed, because you don't want one of those little scares. Those things can be really nasty.
No, you're dead right. It's some relief for the moment. It's not a get out of jail free card, right? Let's play Monopoly. We might get to go around the board a few more times without incurring the cost, but at some point, there's got to be an accounting for that 6-month relief, and where that lands, you have to be fully aware of it. You're dead right.
Yeah, we've got to understand businesses that underpin this in the back end. It is literally one of those points, right? In times like this, it's hard to say excited, but I think that in times of great hardship, and you were saying before, there was a Churchill quote that you talked about, but in times of great hardship, we tend to unite, because the reality is that small business, large business, employees, we're all in the same bucket. And I think we'll chat a little bit about teams and small business in a tick, but
yeah,
we're all in it together. And we've just got to realise that as we go through this, is that at the moment, there's no bad guys. The only bad guy is the virus in this. And it's about working together. And as I say to everybody right about now, everything's a negotiation, right? So you've got to work with the people around you, because ultimately it's just about getting to the opposite side of this. And hopefully we don't want to eat each other alive. We want to negotiate with each other to make sure that we come out the other side, united. And I think that's something that we're going to see as a result of this, around Australia, which, if that happens, that'll be a beautiful thing that we'll be able to look back in a really bad and terrible time.
Mate, agree. I'd just like to point out, mate, I'm glad you got the memo for the uniform for today.
Isn't it? Having said that, mate, we're not two of the most creative individuals. I think if you saw us on 5 out of 7
Friday
days,
uniform.
This is our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Exactly the same shirts, exactly the same jeans, and exactly the same shoes. But I'm the most creative person in the world.
Mate, there you go.
It's easier to have the same uniform out every day.
No, mate, you're dead right about that. We're all in this together, and Australia is a great place, and for all of us, we want it to be even greater after this and come back, because the consequences, like one of the guys were asking, we were sort of chatting the other night, okay, we've printed all this money. At some point, I think some of that money's got to be accounted for at some point. What's going to happen? Is there going to be a tax increase later? Because the old version, nothing's ever for free. There is a cost. Where would that cost land? It's well beyond my pay grade to sort of take a guess at that. Other than I think they might put some taxes up and try and get it back. But with your experience, you could probably pontificate a long time over this one.
Mate, it's an interesting one. We've had some questions come through, and if you're watching this live, just put the questions in the Facebook feed, because we should be able to see them. I've got mine just up here, but mate, and so I'm going to talk about myself and my opinion here. And again, this is huge. This is absolutely an opinion, but I talk about markets as far as financial markets and stock markets of the world, and my opinion as an over the horizon radar. And effectively what that is your an over the horizon radar is a military radar that pings the source from the ground. It pings off a satellite in order to be able to see what's over the other side. And when it comes to financial markets and economics, that's effectively what we're trying to do, except we don't have the same technology, right? We don't have the satellite. We're literally looking at the curvature of light, but we can only see so far. But the likelihood and the general consensus is, and again, this is an economics discussion, not fact of the future, but there is going to be a huge amount of debt, right? And what the government are unlikely and the Reserve Bank are unlikely going to do out the back end of this is raise interest rates, because all that does is it starts to raise the cost of money for the government, which is going to still need to be borrowing more money to be able to fund this. So all other things being equal, it's going to increase the cost of money for the government. So what I think we're looking down the barrel of, again, as an opinion, is I think that we're potentially looking down the barrel of some really long suppressed yield curves. I mean, the 10-year bond rates have dropped. The current bond rates have dropped. In Australia, the Reserve Bank is lending money out at 0.25%, and globally it's basically zero. So the cost of money is free, almost for institutions, and they're probably going to need to keep it quite low for a long period of time until we get some stability. Because remember, it's not just an Australian thing, right? If you look over into the US right about now, I mean, if you have a look at Trump, it seems like Trump's been in his own little world and pretended like he can talk the virus out of doing what it's going to do. And unfortunately, this is one thing that he can't talk his way out of. He can't bully his way out of. It's going to continue. And we've got to understand that we're here, Europe is here, and it was only about 3 years ago now that when all of a sudden the world realised that Greece couldn't pay their debts, that we had a major fall in Australian markets and in international markets. Now, the reality is that Greece hasn't been paying international debt for about 15 years, right? It's just suddenly it became commercial news. But we need to think, they call them the pigs, which is not probably the nicest term for them. But it was Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, right? And they had an inordinate amount of debt that the world was worried about well before this. Now, that's only going to escalate through these periods of time, and the world's uniting to do this. But when we look at the future, when we use our over-the-horizon radar, imagining that interest rates are going to rise sharply in the short to medium term, super, super difficult call to make. And I'm not about making outlandish comments, but what I will caution people about is that I've had people talk about, and Jono, thanks for an incredible question, which was, will we go back to a gold-based currency? But discussions like that is not just over the horizon radar. It is super into the distance radar sort of commentary, and it's impossible to talk about. But what I will kind of articulate is that right now we're actually in management mode and creating amazing. We're creating amazing decisions just to manage the situation. Doing major economic shifts like that and spinning on a dime is highly, highly unlikely, not probable. Every broker that we work with, every asset manager, all of our economists we're talking to are basically saying they have never penned economic updates like this in their entire life. This is totally unprecedented. So we're literally in management mode. So any grand sort of changes like that, especially in the early term, going to be highly unlikely. So if we use that as a little bit of a prelude to talk about financial markets, what we're seeing, and again, this is just some commentary of what we've seen so far, is financial markets, the reason why I've got so much volatility is that they're like that over the horizon radar, right? Financial markets, and so what I'm talking about financial markets, I'm talking about stock markets around the world, they're constantly looking over the horizon. Now, they can't actually see what's going on there. None of us do, but they're constantly trying to anticipate what's actually going to happen, in a month's time, in a week's time, or in, a year's time. And that information gets priced into the market. So what we've seen initially, we literally had 3 or 4 days where the market dropped just instantaneously like a stone. It was impossible to catch. It just happened so quick, it caught everybody completely off guard. And one of the reasons behind that is that about 80% of all trading in the world now is done by algorithmic trading or black box trading. So what happens is when people get fearful and they're trying to see over the horizon and all they see is doom and gloom, then the markets start to fall quickly because they're scared and they sell. And then the black boxes start to trade, and they trade without any discretion. And what's been interesting is there's a concept called buy-sell spreads, right? So normal market conditions might be, Jason goes to buy some NAB shares and the current price is, $20, and he believes that he can get them a little bit cheaper. So he puts it in at $19.50 and hope that, that 50 cents, he gets that trade, right? But when the black boxes sell, they sell without discretion. So they have to sell, right? When they hit this trigger point, they have to sell. Now, if that buy-sell spread drops down, and we've seen it, dramatic declines, then the market just falls and it will sell to whatever the closest bid has been. And we've seen that happen in markets. You can see now why we call markets emotional, because the stimulus packages come out, right? And then we start to use that over the horizon radar, and we go, well, there's a lot of stimulus, so it looks great. But I do think that we're almost in that sort of utopian period of time at the moment where we go, yes, the stimulus packages have come around, But there's also the reality that we're probably going to be sitting in our homes now for the next month or 2 months, like who knows? And none of us really know how it's all going to pan out. But ultimately, whether we take world wars, whether we take old SARS and alike, when we take these things into consideration, markets do recover. And because of the velocity of money these days, it's likely that when the market does recover, and it could go sideways for a while, when it does recover, it's probably going to recover really quickly because of that over-the-horizon radar type of effect. And the reality is that you can't put money into term deposits anymore because you're going to earn 1%. So when people are looking at markets, just understand that they're now swings at 5 to 10% in a single day. And until the market starts to be able to get some certainty of what's over the other side, we're going to see massive swings in the market. And the reason why I say that is that, well, yes, for those of you who want to take opportunities, there's probably opportunities there that are maybe, once in that, 10-year, once in a 100-year type of opportunities. But also be careful when we go back to the gold discussion and Bitcoin discussions, just be careful about, misinformation and over-exuberance and irrational style of investing, because if you get bitten by that fear and you fly out into different types of alternative investments, you may do very, very well. Like Bitcoin, you could end up being one of these instantaneous billionaires, but those billionaires became living in the back of their garage pretty quickly when it fell again. So I think that's the best advice I can give where it comes to markets and investments decisions is to really communicate with the professionals around you and try and understand that markets are constantly trying to view over the horizon, but they're backed by individuals like you and me, and we can be emotional at times. So just be careful about, alternative style of investments and scare tactics, because there's going to be a lot of it around and it's happening in droves at the moment. And yes, you might have a quick fix, but you may well do your dough as well.
Yeah, mate, totally. I think the idea that a little bit of misinformation goes a long way in these times, and being really cognizant of where you are relying on the information from and how you're making those decisions. Like, it's never been more important, just never been more important. Like, I've been saying it for 25 years, don't listen to information that has an emotionally charged reason for communicating to you. All it wants to do is just turn you into a a freak.
Oh yeah. So my brother-in-law said that we should be jumping into gold because it's going to go to X. It's like, okay, what does your brother-in-law do? Well, nothing at the moment. He's been unemployed for the last 24 months. Like, was he an ex-banker or was he an ex-financial markets? No. Does he have any money? No. Maybe go and get some other considerations. And this is the thing, in times like these little Chinese whispers, find the people in your life who are stable and a little bit more pragmatic, and start to listen to those conversations, because these water cooler conversations, I tell you what, they're very, very interesting, and understanding that people develop their profession over a lifetime in order to be able to have a qualified opinion, and yeah, they might be wrong or they might be right at various points in time, but they're probably not going to steer you into the next latest craze that might see you lose your socks.
One thing when you bring it up, like my little tip is be really cognizant of the ideas or relationships or things you entertain at these moments in time, because in our human condition, we're looking for some answers in uncertain times, and this is a great time for shysters and scamsters to be around. Like, let's cut to the chase there. I reckon we'll see the shysters and scamsters, like, they love this shit. So little alert for everyone out there, guys. Like, seriously, like, just second check, second guess, don't rush, just put the radar on, take a deep breath. All sorts of things. Anyway, that's my little moment there. Just be aware of that.
And there already are. There's already heaps of the scammers starting to come out, and there's a lot of press in and around it as well.
Yeah.
But perhaps we can talk about contingency planning for a little bit, and because contingency planning for businesses with teams has been, pretty topical recently. And
Totally. Yeah.
all I'll do is share a couple of conversations that I've had, because there's the job seeker and there's the job keeper, right? And effectively they're the same amount, right? So the best description I can give you is that if you're a sole trader, then and it's just you, then you're going to be potentially eligible for the job seeker regardless, right? The job keeper is there almost like a zero-sum game. And there's a great book, and I've just forgotten the name of the author, Tim somebody, but great by choice. And there's a key part about an American business that almost went under, and they negotiated with their employees. And as I said, everything's a negotiation right about now. But if you're a business owner and your business is looking okay now, but maybe you need to be planning that 2-3 stages down the track, and we call it the three-phase, or the 3 steps in the 3-phase, because step 1 is to obviously get prepared, know where you're going. Step 2 is to eliminate unnecessary expenses, and step 3, then you start to look at your team. But for me, there's sort of 3 steps in that. So there's 2 options that you've got as a business, that when your revenue is dropping, there's 4. You either fund it yourself if you've got the capabilities, you start to chop heads, or you all take a little bit together. And that's what this example in Great by Choice was all about. And
Tim Collins. Tim Collins.
Thank you. And look, I love that idea. Well, I don't love the idea of having to do it, but I love the camaraderie side of it, is that if you've got a great team and yes, your cash flow is coming down, you can literally go to the team. We've had a lot of clients who are doing this, but basically said, look, we need to be unanimous, but we're looking down the barrel of this situation, and it's likely that we're going to go one of 2 ways. We're going to have to start putting people off, or we're all going to have to start to take a hit together. And the way that some people have been approaching it has been sort of high level, high cost. So the top level management, mid-level, and then the foundational level. And let's face it, the foundational level of our businesses is generally where a lot of the grunt work's done. And in order to be able to keep your team, let's face this, and I remember when you said it to me once, Jason, business is a full context sport, and it takes no prisoners. You can get the shit kicked out of you at times, and like we're covering up at the moment, left, right, centre. And so one of the things that we might suggest is that have a chat with your team and have that conversation. We either start to chop, and it could be anyone, or we all start to work together and we take hits together as we go through it. And ultimately, what can potentially happen is the highest percentage drop goes with the highest wages, mid percentage drop, mid wages, and lowest percentage drop, lowest wages. And the team, potentially over time, that gives you the longest longevity. And what's beautiful about the job keeper side of the equation is that there's actually a flaw. There's actually a flaw which we've never ever seen before. That yes, the top salaries are going to get a massive drop, right? But you've got the potential where you can still have everybody employed. And yes, it's a government incentive. And yes, they could get it if they didn't want to be a part of your business and didn't want to work. But I don't believe that's going to be the case for most people. I don't believe that if the business is truly struggling, they're going to jump ship, because there's probably not too many places they're going to be able to jump ship to. And you may be able to unite a team that go down to the lowest level cost base. So you may end up in a position where you're trading with a team of 10 or 20, and you're all taking the hit together and you're all on the job keeper, but you're then innovating and you're trying to figure out ways that your business can be better over time, so that then when we do see the end of this, that then you actually grow that together. And it's it's one strategy that I urge, and I've seen a number of businesses who don't have any contingency planning in place that are just going shit, freaking out. And fair call, right? If you don't have a plan, you're going to be freaking out. But understand that there is a potential to be in this all together at all points in time. So if you're a business owner, firstly, contingency planning, but have a look at taking the hit together where that is necessary.
I'm just going to draw my blind here because the sun's coming in. But
mate, you look like you had some sort of a sun glow there. I thought you were getting browner by the second.
It's shining through the door, mate. Yeah, totally agree on that one. It's an interesting time in that sort of space as a business owner. You can go in and check now. I mean, certainly speaking from my experience right now, the costs of my business now have fallen pretty dramatically as well. So we're all working from home. By and large, if your business income is affected, you've got the capacity potentially to negotiate with your landlord and all sorts of other things as well. So, I think the best outcome for, the Australian economy would be for those businesses to stay intact. Work with everyone in your business to get the JobKeeper, get the PAYG concessions, get the payroll taxes back. There's actually quite a lot of things that business owners can do. For some business owners, that feels like overwhelm at this point. But if you just take a day out and connect with your accountant or a good advisor, they'll get you through this. Or if you've got a really good bookkeeper or financial controller, it's actually quite straightforward to apply and qualify for this stuff. Speaking personally for our business, we immediately applied for the payroll tax relief, and we've already got the payroll tax relief in our bank account as of today. So today I have money from the government. Don't get me started on payroll tax. I never thought we should have first paid the bloody tax in the first place.
Wasn't that the agreement? GST comes in, payroll tax is gone. How did the cheeky little get that through?
And stamp duty was meant to go as well when GST came in. I mean, does everyone fucking remember that? I mean, seriously, payroll tax was meant to go and so was stamp duty, but they're both still here. I mean,
anyway. Good to see none of them live on the back end of this, but I don't think it's likely.
But yeah, as a business owner, certainly, there's certainly, like you said, at least a baseline which is better than nothing. And if you can work it out with your team to have everyone on maintenance mode, ready and fired up to bounce back, then that's it. I mean, really, we're speaking to leadership now, Andy. And from a personal experience, I remember sort of going through the GFC with my team, and we had a rough trot. It's where I sort of coined the phrase, business is a full contact sport and there's no prisoners. The GFC, right now, for the moment, and this is not a prediction, this is just for the moment, the GFC was way rougher. And the government wasn't handing out free cash. There was no 6 months moratoriums anywhere. No, you were just left to fend for yourself. And if you were bashed and bleeding in the gutter, people were just stepping over you. Right now that's not happening. Everyone wants to help. So I don't know if that gives anyone any hope or encouragement, but really, guys, if you're going through something tough right now, just take a deep breath, because the whole system doesn't want this thing to fail. So everyone's trying their best, really, at the end of the day. Doesn't matter which sort of political bent you're on. I think they've been quite clever at how they distribute what they've been distributing. So, we're not going to go down politics, but, there's some money there, there's some support. And if you qualify, let's do it.
Yeah, let's stay away from old politics. But, I think that this is one time where we can actually say that, I think that they're doing a pretty damn good job. And it seems even like the reporters are coming in line and understanding that they shouldn't sensationalise this stuff, because it scares the shit out of people. We don't need to be scared right now.
No.
We need to feel comfortable. There's been a couple of interesting ones that have come through here, Chase.
Awesome.
One's from Damien, and he said, would you recommend placing tenants in a property at the moment?
Is it residential or commercial? So that's where. So right now, from a residential point of view, absolutely 100%. I'd get tenants in there for sure. If you've got a holiday on your mortgage because it was empty or you had some challenges, you could hand that on to a tenant. And then when the world gets back to, everyone's got a job and earning an income, you've got a tenant that's grateful. So I would, from a residential point of view, 100% right now. That's a big yes from me, Damien. But just negotiate the terms of your lease. Your property manager will be able to help you on that for sure. And you can do a 3-month lease. So you can actually do a 3-month lease and then renegotiate it after 3 months in residential terms. So that's something that's probably worth understanding and knowing.
Would you consider having a look at the economic viability of the underlying tenant?
Yeah, so a good property manager does that anyway, Andy. So that's part of the property manager's job. They got to see pay slips. They got to see jobs. That's a normal thing. That before Coronas, that was 100% normal anyway. I think, you know, right now it's more important than ever. So just make sure your property manager's doing that job. A good property manager would be, you know, 101 of property management, checking a tenant for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, mate. I think I might take the next one unless you want to jump in on it. There's one from Michelle. Question about money in the bank. Is it secure? And it's a really interesting one because previously, like Jay said it earlier on, like this is very, very different time. What we're going through now, we actually have the banks have the support of the government, right? And that they didn't have the support in the GFC. They didn't have it in the depression. They were almost at war with each other at that point in time.
Yeah.
Right up until they put the bank guarantee on cash deposits, which basically meant that the reserve, that the Australian government was securator. It was basically guaranteeing the money that you had in a bank. Right now, we hear these things about what happened in Greece. We hear that what happened over in Italy and Spain and in other countries around the world, and we can never say no, right? Because unprecedented events can happen. But we have the highest rated banks in the world, the highest rating that you can still get within the Big Four and Macquarie. So, is it secure? It is it is the most secure place in the world almost. Other than actually having it in gold bars in your own house. But then you want a pretty good lock and key. Right? You want a pretty good
yeah. You want to have a big fence around your house.
Absolutely, be sitting there with a shotgun just on the front. But look, where the security comes is if you have loans with the same bank, because banks have the support of the government, but they're still wanting to watch their balance sheets. Right, and all of the responsible lending that was ironically enough put on the banks over the last 2 years with the Royal Banking Inquiry, all of that legislation has basically been lifted. So they've basically almost been told, from being one of the tightest regulatory environments as far as banking is concerned and lending money, we're almost in ninja loan territory. So the government knows that in the future, the bank's balance sheets are going to be busted up. Right, and the government is basically guaranteeing depositors' funds. But if you have loans with the same bank, there's no guarantee that the bank is not going to try and take extra security from different places.
Let me jump in on that one, Andy. That one's called the All Monies Clause, and it's called cross-securitization and cross-collateralization. So even before the Corona world, we were working with our clients to say, never, ever, ever, ever have your savings account with the banks that you borrow with. Your personal money should be separate from your banks that you borrow with. Your personal cash should be separate from your business. Any business owners on the call right now, I've said this for so many years, never leave your personal money in an institution that you bank with your business, and never have an overdraft secured against your house with the same bank. Because it's times like these when you realize how in danger you are. It's really hard not to do. It's really easy to do because the banks make it so easy. But guys, if there's anything that comes out of this and you get through unscathed, like, don't ever bank with the same institution you've got your businesses with, and don't ever bank with the same institutions you've got your loans with, ever. Big no. If you want to be super safe, I've still got my Commonwealth Bank. What was the little bloody saver account that you got when you were a kid? Your little your Dolomite account.
Dolomite account.
That's where my personal money goes, and everything else is in. I've got 20 other institutions, but listen, none of them. I won't ever get a loan with the Commonwealth Bank ever. I'm not going to do anything business with them. I'm never going to lend with them. Nothing. I've just got my personal money there.
And I've got the same. I've literally still got the same accounts, and strangely enough, I've been using it recently. I've been getting banking statements, and I've told them so many times to stop sending me the statements. My nana opened it up for me when I was full of savings.
Young age now, mate.
And obviously, as soon as I got old enough, that money disappeared pretty quickly. There was 50 cents in the bank account. I went overseas, and anyway, that bank account has been reignited with some reasonable amount of security funds. But absolutely, and this isn't a now thing. This is stuff that you and I have been chatting about as far as risk management for business owners and personally,
100%.
for quite some time now.
Yeah,
just you've got to be aware that banks are businesses as well, and they do have balance sheets, and we've got to manage our risk as well with the banks. And so, it's good to have it spread around. Jason, another question just came through, and I know that there is a limit. What was the limit of the bank guarantee of deposits up to what? Do you remember? Or I might have to.
Are you talking about in the GFC or now?
No, now, because they've still got the guarantee on banking deposits. But I think there was a limit. It was up to X. I'll have to have a look at that, Michelle.
Check in. What I do know at the moment from the banking world, some things potentially for some people might be worried about, they haven't been able to pay a bill, something hasn't gone their way. Right now, they have increased the time frame for a statutory demand letter as well from 21 days to 6 months, and they've increased the bankruptcy dollar amount from 10,000 to 20,000. So literally, guys, the government sort of said, listen, we're going to give everyone sort of 6 months to sort this out. We think it's going to be 6 months long. So if you do have some challenges, you've got a 6 month window there, give or take, from kind of today to sort of clean up your act, really, at the end of the day, if you do have some challenges inherently,
And the government have basically almost said, we'll figure out big enterprise, you support small enterprise. They've almost said that. So you support the people on the ground in front of you, and we'll take care of big business. That's basically what they've been saying. And it's about time that big business actually paid some back. So sorry we couldn't answer that directly, Michelle. We've got a few more here from Trina. What questions would you ask your tenants so that landlords can keep the lines of communication open?
So if you haven't heard from your property manager or your tenant right now, then there's nothing going on that you need to worry about right now. So just remember this.
Of your tenants. So what would you ask your tenants so that the landlord can keep the lines of communication open?
So we've been asking the property managers to talk to the tenants and check in on all of our tenants. So we property manage about 600 properties in Melbourne and Brisbane, and all of our property managers have reached out via emails asking, how's everything at your end? How's your job security? Any issues? Anything we need to be aware of? That can go two ways. It can sort of give the tenant a bit of maybe I'll look to get out of some rent if I need to. And we've had that, and we've sent back to them the letter that we need them to fill out. Okay, so we've created a letter that we need them to fill out. Show us your severance. Show us your dismissal letter. Show us your severance pay. Have you applied for the job start? Have you applied for the job keeper or your employer? Have you applied for your $10,000 in super that you can get access to? We're asking them for that because as a property manager, they're legally allowed to ask those sorts of questions of the tenant. So for you as the property owner, work with your property manager to ask those questions. So if it's around a sort of financial issue, ask them those things. Where's the letter that they said they've been fired? Have they gone for the job start or the new start or whatever it's called? Have they applied for rent assistance? Can they get JobKeeper, and have they applied for their super, their $10,000 super thing?
And I'd sort of say on the other side of the equation, because I have had a couple of conversations with people as well who have gotten their backs up a little bit about getting the request for this information. And I kind of go back to, we've also got to protect Australia against people taking the piss. So understand that, it's probably somebody just trying to make sure that it's deserving. And it's not necessarily them having judgment on you, but it's, I guess, them trying to make sure that there aren't opportunists out there. And unfortunately, there are people who will, I won't call them pond scum, but people will really try and take advantage of these situations. So I understand that on both sides of the equation, so that we don't, that we work together ultimately.
Yes. Andy, I'm happy to share, like I said, some templates and some information with your crew as well. We've already shared it.
So put your so your crew have already got it, but you took me through it before. That's awesome. So if you put your name, actually, if you direct message me with your email address, is that what you need? What do you need for it?
Yeah, email address.
Direct message me with your email address, because Jason and the team have actually put little landlord packages, tenant packages, little videos on all of this stuff. So whether you're a tenant or a landlord, you can even look at the landlord if you're a tenant, because then you understand the position, inversely and can work better. So, mate, I really appreciate offering that out. So if you're on this call, just direct message our Facebook page with your email address and just say, can you sign us up for Jason's what is it, Corona package? I feel bad even saying it like that, but
yeah,
say the Corona package.
Yeah, the Corona property care pack or something. Yeah,
the Corona property care pack. So thank you, mate. That's awesome. It really is very, very cool. And yeah, you're awesome for doing it. With mortgages being frozen, do you expect the property market to be impacted after the 6-month mortgage freeze?
Yeah, listen, like I sort of mentioned before, I think the residential market will largely go unscathed. And what I mean by that is I don't think the values will plummet in any way, shape or form. I think average properties will adjust. I think good ones will stay dead flat. I think the rents will drop maybe 10 to 15%, but don't overreact to that, because in the last 2 weeks, interest rates have dropped 35%. So the net result for investors is actually almost a smidgen better cash-wise, even if their rents drop a smidgen, because the cost of loans have dropped. Unbelievable. Like, you can get a 5-year fixed interest rate right now at 2.19%. 2.19. It's mind-blowing, right? And, and Bob and Mary, the tenant, they're paying 4%. Just do the quick math on that. Like, there's a margin there, So right now, I think rents will drop a little bit, and I think average properties will drop a little bit in value, but good ones will stay flat. I think we'll see flat to a little bit down for 6 to 18 months. That's what I say in the market. That will depend on. Yeah,
it's a good thing, isn't it? Property is one of those things that really good quality stock almost withstands any time, but there are pockets that'll be majorly affected. So it's almost impossible to answer broadly. You need to answer it in these pockets.
Totally. Yeah. It'll be affected in the areas. So these times will affect the lower value properties, because often those part-time workers or the lower value tourism jobs and stuff, they get affected a little bit more sometimes with this stuff. So, it's interesting. But I think longer term, though, you give it 18 months to 3 years. I've been saying this for quite a while. I did a Facebook video about 9 months ago. The great residential property construction undersupply was already like in disaster trajectory already before Corona. Like, the supply chain was already disastrous, like heading like this, like cliff dive. So you think about this now, the dollar's, I don't know, 60 cents today or something, Andy?
And it got as low as 58 and a bit, I think, at bottom 2.
So then, all right, let's build a house in a year's time, and the dollar's still 60 cents. The construction materials, that we were importing are now, do the math. I think you're better at this than me, but I think they're 20 to 30% more expensive to the materials to build. And now the supply of those is going to be constrained. I see some very powerful supply issues in the positive if you're in the game, not necessarily if you're out of the game, in that 2 to 5 year window out there. I think an undersupply will be insane. I don't think interest rates will go up, like you're saying, anytime soon. I think that'll push values and rents in the right direction in the medium term for residential. The one that concerns me, Andy, is the industrial commercial world, and where those rents and tenancies end up after this. That's the one that concerns me the most. I think that's the one that's going to be in the most mayhem on the backside of this.
And my sort of take on that is it's also going to depend on the innovation of markets. So when you talk about industrial commercial, it could actually flip and become, more prosperous than ever. If you think about, just have a look. I mean, I'm going to give them a little plug because I'm going to see whether they want to join us here. But I met Andre from Vino Mofo, and they're a cool little wine distributor, and they go around, they get wine from some great Australian wineries. And this is a Granite Hills 2015 Pinot Noir from the Macedon Ranges. $9 a bottle delivered to your door. I'm not plugging them. I've got no, reference to them. I don't get any commissions, but it's actually a cracking little bottle of wine. I might actually just drink a little bit more of it, but
but I think so. I had to go and grab some from my mum. I think it's a $6 clean skin bottle from the bottle, but probably not as classy as yours, Andy.
And it's called the Gossip. I love it.
The Gossip. It's perfect.
And I've completely forgotten where I was going with that. I was going on some sort of a tangent. It's not the wine, or maybe it is the wine, but actually, with things like this, we can support Australian suppliers by getting this stuff delivered to us as well. So a nice little quick tip to stay in good quality. I'm just going to filter through a few more of these questions, mate. I know that we're going a lot over time than what we were expecting to do. There's one, and I'm not quite sure what the question is. It says, "Thank you, guys. Great tip from Shelley Green. How do we change that once our circumstances have changed and we cannot refinance?" I'm not quite sure about the question, exactly what it means, unless you can figure it out, Jace. But one of the things that I will say is that at the moment, if you are locked into fixed rates and you have got your loans out there, literally the rates have dropped, like you said, by 35%. So yes, there are going to be break fees associated with these sorts of things, but the banks are open for business. So if you actually still do have good cash flow, and maybe you won't have in 3 months' time or 4 months' time, or maybe you will, but open up the conversation with your brokers and your other banks, because they're super, super competitive. And some banks are paying $5,000 just to move across.
Yeah, switching over. Yeah. Mate, absolutely.
So it's not just negotiating with the banks in bad time. If you're actually doing well, and look, there are so many businesses that are going to do very, very well off this. And I don't mean bastardizing, infrastructure-based businesses. Like the government is putting, and you're not seeing it, or you might not know about it, but they're putting so much money into infrastructure spend at the moment, where they can have 1 or 2 people in a big machine digging up lots of dirt, laying the foundations for something that then they can put hundreds of workers on in the future, in the not too distant future. They're spending a lot of money in these areas. So there are businesses that are going to go absolutely gangbusters based on this. And so I guess as a business tip, or as an employee, if you're an employee, have a look at those businesses that are actually going to be thriving from this for the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 infrastructure projects, that 5, 10, 15-year sort of projects. Have a look at those sorts of areas. If you're unemployed at the moment, check out how you can skill up, educate into the sectors that are potentially going to go into a 10-year boom on the back of this. But I guess the tip on there is that if you do look good right now, have a chat, open up the conversations with the bank, get the sharp rates that everyone's getting. It's, as I said, it's always a negotiation.
Yeah,
there's been a couple in here.
Interesting one in that. No, mate. One of the things that we coach and teach people as well is never wait to ask for a loan from the bank until you need it. Always ask for a loan from the bank when you don't need it. You know, and that means just, again, in real estate, the idea of liquidity is only really facilitated by having access to open lines of credit or redraw facilities. And, you know, you got to have them maximum all the time. And this is kind of like, you know, you can't go back 6 months, but going into the future, I want people to remember, I think I was having a laugh today, and it's not a joke, but it is a laugh. Like it's an I told you so comment, right? You know, I told you to get access to your equity when you didn't need it and you didn't listen, you know? So again, it's the idea that now, if you like what you're saying, if you're good, crack in, get access now, because things might change in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months time for you. In residential lending, they can't undo that. You've still got access to that money. You've still got access to that equity. Unless you stop paying your mortgages, then it's there, it's usable, it's accessible. So yeah, for Shelley there, I'd say, listen, get it all organised if you can. Now, crack on. Yeah, absolutely.
And look, and keep doing it. You know, this isn't, I mean, you and I have been talking about this ever since we met each other. I can't believe I'm going to say this on a live, but maybe it's the wine talking, but it's like when you're a teenager and I call it the condom theory. It's better to have one and not need it than need one and not have it. And that's how you got to look at finance and banking, is that all the time should always be, and institutions are doing this at every moment. You know, they might have big war chests of cash, but they've also got massive potential of funding over a separate side. So they've got multiple contingencies, and realistically, as business owners or as individuals, we need to try and structure these things up as best as we can. And this is a classic example of those times. And I get it, for some people, it's not going to be possible right now. And I don't want to be the I told you so person, but what you can take from it is when it does change, and it will change, and times will get back to normal. And when they get back to normal, these are the sorts of lessons that you want to take into the future, because there will be hard times again. And we're obviously in the midst of some hard times. We don't know how hard they're going to get, but ultimately if you don't learn from it, that is the biggest crime. And it's a matter of, well, if what would I have done differently now, and not to smack yourself, but just to go, what would I have done differently that would have helped me now, becomes the what am I going to do in the future to make sure that I'm never, exposed again. And, these are the risk management tools that, Jace, you and I have sort of learnt over the same way. We've just had the shit kicked out of us at times, and
the school hard knocks.
Yeah, exactly right. We're in the trenches just the same as everyone else. So I appreciate the questions, guys. Trina said, thank you. We're going to go and chat with the property manager. And also posted 250K in term deposits, but we're still not quite sure of the cash at bank. Well, I can't believe that. I've never heard that before. I'm all in one bank. A new task for tomorrow. Absolutely. It's a great task for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Well, mate, we've gone through most of the questions that I've got here. So for those of you who are still listening, still watching, Jason and I have kind of dedicated our time to do this on a frequent basis. Like, so if this is useful, please let us know. And then please, as we put our posts up in our relative places, ask questions beforehand so we can answer them, or we can spend some time researching them, because some of them we're not going to be able to answer and fire off the hip. This is the first of the initiative, and we're going to try and filter the information, because one of the biggest things that both of us have seen is that we field a huge amount of calls based on concern that is from misinformation or just poor interpretation of the information. So our goal at the moment is really, because we've got some very, very high level people that we chat with, and they chat with then very, very high level people who are then connected to the people who are making the decisions in government. And all it is us being able to create a supply chain of information that is accurate, that is calm, considered, and useful in your world, but not just your world, but for the people that surround you. So not that you can go and tell people what to do, but at least you can be the calm one while everybody is falling apart or talking shit at times, really, because let's face it, there is a lot of bullshit that's about. I'm just going to quickly go back over the questions. I think we've gone through most of them.
I've got a couple.
There's just one more.
Got a couple at my end, Andy. From
go for it.
One off the positive feed from Leone. So, hey, Leone, hopefully you're still listening in. So Leone said, I heard someone say the banks can cancel equity loans you have. Supposedly this was done during the GFC. So the answer is no, they cannot cancel those loans as long as you're still making the payments, Leone. Okay. Now, if you don't make the payments, and this is where the sort of grey zone is about the having the rest. So our feedback and legal opinion has been you are still liable for these payments. You've had an agreement with the bank that they've been capitalised. It's not that you haven't made them. They've just been accounted for in some other months into the future. So technically you have not breached the loan contract. You're still, the loan contract is still rigi-dig. You haven't breached it. It's been a mutual agreement. And so the answer is no, that cannot happen in residential lending under the Consumer Credit Code, Leone. Okay, so there's massive amounts of Consumer Credit Code protection for residential lenders, participants. If you have a commercial loan, guys, and I don't mean to sound alarmist, but commercial loans are not residential. They're not consumer credit loans, and they are open to whatever the bank wants to do, and they're open to review every 12 months. They're open to the bank checking out your financials. There's all sorts of different rules. But for you and your home and property investors for residential, the answer is no, that can't happen. Okay, so that was just to clear that one up.
Just on that, that's an even more important reason why, if you do have commercial loan facilities, that you really be very careful about where you hold your cash.
Absolutely.
Have a chat with your advisor or your legal counsel, and because ultimately, yes, they can ask for reviews, but if the cash ain't there, then they're going to probably more so negotiate than foreclose or try and kick you out, because they can't, right, at the moment. But where you hold your money is so important, so important. So commercial loans, just put that on and have a little bit of think about it and chat with your advisors as to what's a good appropriate risk management strategy.
Yeah. And there was one last question from Gail, talking about having savings sitting in a redraw facility right now. Listen, Gail, if you think that you might run into some payment troubles or you need to look for a holiday, I would err for the moment on the side of caution, and I would shift that money out of the redraw and into another account. That's what I would do for the moment. Like Andy and I said, we don't believe in any way, shape or form that the banks are going to do things on purpose. But what you've got to know is there's automated processes in the banking infrastructure that are just going to flow through. And, it's been years and years of automated processes happening from banking that helps businesses grow. That will happen. And redraw will be one of them. Like, they won't be able to stop that in their systems anytime soon. So just take it out for the short term, just to be safe and secure. It's not offset, redraw. Okay. Redraw is extra payments that you've put into the bank. Yeah. So good distinction. That's it for my end.
If you're a owner, or if you've got other commercial loans, commercial facilities, consider other banks, but have a chat with your advisors as your risk management strategies, really. If in doubt, rip it out. If really in doubt, get it into another AAA rated bank. But of course, go and have a chat with your advisors, because there could be other things at play that we don't know about, which mean that you need to be structured the way that you are, right? So even though that Jason and I are sharing a lot of things that are fundamentally true as far as risk management are concerned. We don't know your individual structures or your individual circumstances, and we don't know the ramifications of potentially moving stuff in regards to other arrangements that you have within the structures that you have. So, always chat with your advisors because, you might breach a covenant by doing something, and obviously we don't want you to be doing that because that might have broader ramifications in the commercial world.
Absolutely.
There's an interesting one here. What happens if I'm in a credit union? And I haven't dealt with a question like that since Pyramid. I guess my response would be, is in a time when if you're scared and you're looking for the maximum amount of security, you go for the highest rated, most secure. And if there aren't bank guarantees on the funds underlying, and you're scared, take the money and put it in a place where it's basically guaranteed by the government. And if you need to spread it out across a number of institutions, then spread it out across a number of institutions. Friendly societies, building societies, smaller banks that are not part of the government guarantee, you can ring them up and ask them. And it's probably a prudent thing to do if you are that worried, because yes, they're not always covered by exactly the same conditions, and that's best to kind of research that and then make the appropriate decisions. Better to ask the smart questions, which people think are stupid. So ask the stupid questions in order to make good decisions, I guess is the key here. And I think that above all else, it's just ask questions. And so again, if you have more questions for this, put them in for us next week. We'd like to get more practical and tactical with our responses. Have you got much more there, Jace?
No, mate. I'm done at my end, mate. Yeah, absolutely. If anyone's got any, questions or things that we touched on this week we didn't answer, happy to do that. Potentially we could dive into some other stuff in and around, structuring and taking care of things if things are going sideways, Andy. Like everyone just chuck some ideas in the comments and we can structure a good conversation around that for sure. Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
100%. Look, here to serve you in whatever way we can. And I'd like to just throw something else out there is that, if you are one of the companies that is, listening to this and you're in the ability to take advantage of opportunities, that's great, because there are equity market opportunities that are going to be once in a lifetime opportunities for you. There are going to be, if you're young and you've got superannuation funds, have a chat with your advisors, your investment advisors, because you'll somewhere along this line, you will be in the buying opportunity of a lifetime. But not just from an opportunity perspective, if you've got the resources, just support the local business. And that's kind of what I was getting to around the wine side of the equation. I live on the Mornington Peninsula. Red Hill Estate just fired out a call to us saying 50% off their wines delivered to you. Not trying to get everyone pissed, but let's face it, as Australians, we saw an 85% increase on alcohol consumption from Dan Murphy's and everything over the last month or so. But Dan Murphy's is great, and support the big company, but remember the local communities, right? The ones that are around you. So if you can, if it's a matter of just making a few extra phone calls around that, you can support the winery down the road or the local business and get the toilet paper from the IGA rather than the big chains. I'm not saying ignore the big chains. They need our business too, and they are staples of the economy. But small business is, before going into this, small business was the largest taxpayer in Australia. I think it was either by 46 or 56%. I think we were over half. Small business is the backbone of Australia. So when you're out there doing your things and you're looking at Costco, or you've got your IGA or your local milk bar or your local winery or brewery or these places that are around you, they're going to be doing things and they're going to be making it very, very cheap for you and very easy for you. Please, if you've got capacity, support the incredible businesses in the community, because they are literally the backbone of this entire country. And I hope that as we get through all of this together, that's one of the things that really survives, because I do, and I hope that nobody takes this the wrong way, that we are given the adversity that gives us the opportunity to learn the lessons to be able to make Australia an incredible country again. We still are an incredible country, but we can make ourselves stronger. And I truly believe that if we learn the lessons that are available to us right now, that we can come out better as people and as a nation, even if it feels really, really dark right now. So support the local community, support the local businesses, and support innovation with them, and just do whatever we can.
Totally, mate. Well said, mate. I think that's a great way to end today's conversation. Maybe if you do end up with a little bit more resources in these times, spread the love, because everyone needs it. We're in this together, and for you and I, we want to be able to help anyone with our experiences and capacity in any way, shape we can. So hopefully everyone enjoyed today, and we look forward to doing a few more. And I know on this month, Andy, you and I are going to spend some more time in the positive environment and crew, and talk a little bit more about opportunities as well. So I look forward to that. So, mate, thank you. Good to do some wine and wisdom. Fantastic. And cheers to everyone. Hopefully Friday's been pretty good for you guys, and hopefully see you next Friday. Thanks, Andy. Awesome stuff. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Happy weekend.